Welcome everyone to the very first episode of Coffees with Karl. This is a video series where I interview experts in their field, which will hopefully deliver some valuable insights for you all in your financial journey through life. So today I've got Sam Wilkinson with me. He's an old friend of mine and a successful real estate agent in the Burton region. He's been inside and sold some of the nicest and most expensive houses in Melbourne over many years. He's a partner at Burton Real Estate. He's a Hawthorn supporter. He used to live in Richmond. So given the weekend's events with the AFL Grand Final, he's seen probably too much success, I would suggest.
Pretty happy to be out in Richmond, to be honest, after the weekend.
That's true.
Swan Street looked pretty interesting, didn't it?
There was some interesting live feeds going on in Swan Street on the weekend.
Pretty happy to have a river between us, between Richmond and Hawthorn,
absolutely, absolutely. So, so can you just, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Karl, and thanks for having me involved in the inaugural episode. I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. We had a family home in Mont Albert. I went to school at one of the private schools at Carey in Kew, and so basically spent the majority of my childhood growing up around these areas. After school, I did a university degree. I did a commerce degree, which had a bit of a marketing specialisation. So didn't exactly know where I wanted to go with life, but that was sort of I knew it was somewhere in the marketing field. Completed that, went off travelling, or at least a working holiday over to London, and it was in my second year there that I found my way into real estate, somewhat by chance actually, but enjoyed my time working in and around South Kensington and Notting Hill in the lettings market, and continued that when I came home. I started as an assistant with an agent who was working with an Armidale-based agency. And then 12 months later, I was approached by Burton to go and work with them. They were a predominant player in the Stonington market at the time. Obviously, historically been associated with the bigger houses around South Yarra, Toorak, etc. So I thought that was a great opportunity. So I joined Burton, where I've been now for 12 years. 6 years of that was based in South Yarra, and then just over my first 6 years there, we were just generally getting a stronger foothold in Burundara with some of the better homes in this area, and that led to us creating an opportunity in 2011 to open up an office here. So I moved across to the office along with my current business partners, a couple of which joined us from Jellis Craig, and we've had a successful run for the last 6 years or so, running out of that office at 553 Glenferrie Road, and had some good initial years with you located at the back there for a while as well.
Absolutely. Plenty of work done.
Heaps getting it.
So can you just share your thoughts on the market? Everyone's got an opinion on the property market. It gets discussed at every barbecue and water cooler in Australia, I'm pretty sure, and you can read any article in the paper, but it's always good to see someone in the trenches on the front line. And, give us your thoughts, mate.
It's very healthy across the board, really, around Burundara, really, particularly in the key suburbs. If you look at Hawthorn East, Kew, Canterbury, Camberwell, and it's the demand is certainly very strong, particularly for the better streets and the better addresses and the better pockets of those suburbs. Sure. So most family homes that are selling are generally selling under competition, and that be from local families who are either looking to upgrade, or on the other side of things where the kids have left school and they're looking to downgrade, or ultimately, obviously there's been a lot of reporting and people noting, buyers of Asian background buying in and around the marketplace, whether they be international families who are moving here for the first time, or as a matter of fact having been based here for a number of years and upgrading. So overall the market is very healthy. Demand is still outweighing supply, and I expect us to have a pretty strong spring as we get further into it.
It's already performing well in Melbourne, at least. So can you talk us through some common mistakes or traps, things to avoid when choosing a real estate agent, for all the would-be vendors out there who are maybe thinking about selling in this beautiful spring? It's 23 degrees outside today, and the sun is out. It's a fantastic place to be. So what should they be looking at, Sam?
Rather than the traps, I think it's probably best to focus what is the right thing to do, and obviously to interview a few agents to get the best feel for who's in and around the marketplace and who you feel most comfortable with. I mean, that's certainly something that I would stress, is make sure that you like the person that you're going to be selling your house with, because or apartment for that matter, because obviously it's a relationship there, and you want to be able to feel that you can build some trust in and around what they're saying. I would be advising people not to be too distracted by the lowest commission or the lowest advertising budget or recommendations that an agent might provide, because they are typically tactics that agents will use to try and buy business, or ultimately they might also exaggerate price. So just be conscious around that. I think you want to really deal with a specialist in and around your marketplace who is familiar with the local sales, is familiar with the local market, and who can really give you the right advice when the time's right, whether that be good, whether that be things are going well and you've got multiple interest in the property, or on the flip side, you need to prepare for the fact if things aren't going so well, are they going to be able to deliver you, that message, so that you can, make the next right move. So I think they're probably the key components, and I would say certainly in the selection process, don't get too bogged down on the commission initially. Try and pick who you feel most comfortable with and who you think is going to do the best job for you, and then, if need be, go back to them and try and negotiate the best commission, because people often forget that commission is negotiable, and most agents will want to work with you, and will just look to do it for something fair.
Absolutely, and I think the importance of key advisors in highly emotional times when big decisions have to be made around should I take this price or should I go on this date or whatever it might be, pre-auction offers, things like that. It's really important to have someone with a level head who does it day in, day out on your side. And also, just going back to your comment on commission, it's something that it just reminds me of a famous quote, which I love, and it's price is what you pay, value is what you get. So don't get caught up on comms.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, and that also ties into, the money that you invest in the preparation of the home as well. It's always best, I think, to really, if necessary, speak to a stylist. Get the house looking at its very best, because I know a number of us live in our homes and we enjoy and love the way that they look ourselves, but ultimately you're preparing the home for the wider market, and so you want to make sure that you really are creating something that's going to create emotional attachment with the buyer as they walk through. And as an extension of that, also look at the marketing and how are the photos right. Are you advertising in the right mediums to attract the right market as well? Because $5,000 to $10,000 difference in a marketing schedule might sound like a lot of money, and it is. But ultimately, when you've got an asset that might be worth $2 or $3 million, the difference that it can be created by actually finding that extra buyer. Well, even if you're talking between one or
too many people.
But if you're talking even at lower levels as well, even between $1 and $2 million, if you can get two buyers into place who are driven by emotion. Sure. I've seen numerous occasions in the past of prices exceeding vendors' expectations by the fact that they're able to get genuine competition for the property. So make sure you weigh all those things up and not just go for sort of the cheapest deal, I suppose.
Yeah, it's good advice. Good advice. So everyone talks about location and critical, most important part of a property decision. Can you talk us through what features, what sort of house, internal features, or what room is the most important to your particular purchase when they're walking through a property? I'll just make this a quick one, but when they're walking through a property, are they instantly walking to the kitchen and going, "This is amazing, I'm sold," or are they, looking for off-street car spaces, etc.?
Look, every buyer's different, and that's something that you sort of learn after you've been in the game for a while. That you walk through some houses sometimes and you go, "Oh, Jesus, this one might be a bit of a tough one," and then it turns out being, you've got a couple of buyers who really fall in love with this for a specific reason. So that's something that I've learned, is that there's always a buyer for a house. But if you're talking more generally speaking, if we take Hawthorn as an example, it's consistent period housing is what makes this area so well known. So. That's something that people look for. Obviously, these days, a lot of it is about the kitchen family room, because that's where the people, do entertain. So having a layout that's conducive to that sort of modern style of living, I think, is important. But and just generally speaking, I think natural light is a big thing as well, whether it be a northerly rear orientation or just ensuring that the home does allow a lot of natural light to flow through it. Those type of things are what contribute to the overall feel of a property. which people mention regularly. And you mentioned off-street car parking. Yeah, that's certainly a priority, particularly in the high density areas where on-street car parking even can be quite limited.
Yeah, very important. So just changing tack a little bit. So thinking about the best streets in Melbourne, the houses, etc. St George's Road in Toorak, for example, Hawthorn Grove here in Hawthorn. How do these streets become so renowned over such a long period of time? What drives that long-term growth? It's something I've always been interested in. They have these reputations, and for a reason. You just have to drive down them to see the nice houses. But they perform well over a very long period of time. So
absolutely. And look, you've identified there two of the better streets in Melbourne. So both historically and in current terms as well. I mean, if you start with the St George's Road in Toorak as an example, it really is the two similar characteristics that those streets both have in Hawthorn Grove and St George's Road is they're lovely wide streets, beautiful established trees and nice and tree lined. And in the case of St George's Road, I mean, you've got consistently large allotments, so you're not finding you've got that high density living or too many apartments or those type of things which can somewhat devalue an area, and that's what really holds the value of that street up in terms of the prestige in living it is the consistent nature of the larger homes. Yeah, very much so. And if you look at Hawthorn Grove, I mean, that's even more protected in many ways because of the heritage overlay that does flow down that street, as well as all of those houses within the Grace Park precinct. So the fact that they have heritage overlays and it maintains that aesthetic from street level is something that people are very much drawn to in terms of knowing they're buying into a street where that's not going to change. Also, that in that case, it's very conveniently located for your restaurants, shopping, transportation, whether it be trams or trains on Glenferrie Road. I mean, that precinct is ever increasing in its popularity, and obviously the proximity to the schools as well, but easy walking distance to everything, coupled with the consistent housing is really the driving factor there.
Yeah, interesting. So do you have any tips for purchasers who are moving into, say, the next price bracket? They're thinking about upgrading. I've got a lot of clients on my books that in my database that they have been in their own home for 5 or so years, and it might be an apartment or whatever it might be, and they're looking, they've had a family and so forth. They're looking to push out into a suburb, and they want to upgrade. What are the things that they should be looking out for?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, I think you want to look at whether it's buying into something that's renovated or otherwise. You want to look at a house that is going to there's going to be something that you can grow into and enjoy. And if you're buying a house to be renovated, make sure it's got the right layout in which you can upgrade it.
Floor plan's very important. Yeah.
Floor plan is the key. Obviously the style of home, in that if you are going to invest in something and renovate it, make sure it's got the right sort of look, so that will endure in its popularity, increase in value as you invest more money into it as well. And ultimately, look, it's really about once again the conveniences that you're buying into, and is it close to everything? Is it walking distance from the shops? Is there a trams or train line nearby? All of those basic things that people generally looking for are ultimately the key. And if it's an area that's close to schools, is it a house that's going to be long term? Obviously benefit your family, but obviously have an enduring popularity in that sense as well. But anything like that, I mean, I think if you're looking to upgrade and research around the marketplace, don't be afraid to reach out to a local expert, be it an agent or an advocate or otherwise, and really get some advice about, houses that might currently be on the market, but also see if there's opportunities that might be available off market, because quite often there are people that we're dealing with who don't necessarily want to go down the path of a full marketing campaign, but have said, if you're dealing with someone for our house, we'd be happy to show them through privately. So don't be afraid to reach out to agents in that regard. Yeah,
some people just don't want people going through their house, 30 couples going through a house on a Saturday, and they're quite private in that way. So, you never know unless you ask. I always say that to my clients. So it doesn't hurt to ask the question. You never know what comes from it. So thanks again for that. So a very topical question that comes up for my clients is the auction process. So quite a nerve-wracking experience. I've put my hand up at an auction before on behalf of a client, and the heart rate still got up there. So I always like to when I'm speaking to agents, and you're an auctioneer yourself, so you run auctions. what tips do you have? What sort of strategies do you find works?
Yeah, well, the auctions are really, it's a little bit about reading the players to what might be playing out on the day. So whether that be, there's not a lot of other interest in the property, or there might be 2 or 3 other keen buyers. So the main thing is to be prepared for all scenarios that might actually play out when you're actually there. And for most people, when they're purchasing a property, it's not something that they're overly familiar with, or that they do a hell of a lot. I mean, I think there's still a philosophy, a lingering philosophy for some people, probably from the older generation, when you go to auction, don't bid. And I think that's probably left over from the old system of dummy bidding, where, there was don't bid until the property's on the market. Well, things have changed a fair bit since that. That was about 12 years ago now, and there's not really an advantage I see in not bidding at an auction these days, because even if it is to be passed in, you may as well be holding the bid so that you're in the position to negotiate. So obviously the timing of your bidding and all those sort of things can be variable. And then there's other things that you can do when you're actually in a competitive bidding scenario, in terms of the speed of your bidding or the increments by which you're going up. That could be a smaller increment, or it could be a larger increment as well. But all of these things, I think, are difficult to assess unless you're actually dealing with an expert or someone who understands the system, who does it regularly. So my general comment would be is, if you don't do it regularly, reach out to an expert. Now, that might be a buyer's advocate who can help you out, or it might be a local agent that you've got a good relationship with. And I know a number of clients reach out to me, and that's not something that I charge for, and I think a number of other agents would be the same, and they're more than happy to help prospective clients through that process and stand with them on the day.
Yeah, well, as you say, if you're not doing it every day, it's a nerve-wracking experience. So that's great, Sam. So last question for you, something I'm going to ask all of my guests is, what is the best piece of financial advice you've ever received?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say probably stick to your strengths in terms of your knowledge base. That's what I've found has worked for me, which is obviously more property related. My father gave me the piece of advice to try and knock my mortgage down as quickly as possible. And I think with the way that the property market has appreciated in terms of properties that I've purchased, I've found that to be of real value to get control of your mortgage in terms of your first or your second purchase. Because once you've got that asset that you ultimately own, that opens up a lot more possibilities in terms of what you can do with your wealth. So that's something that I've ultimately applied. And I guess for those of you who are looking to just get into the market, I would say it's don't be overly fussy about what your first purchase might look like. I mean, find something, if it's an apartment related or small house, that's got the fundamentals in place. But remembering that that your main priority should be, is this something that I might want to sell in the space of somewhere between 3 and 7 years' time, when my lifestyle might change, or there might be more family related decisions that are required. Remembering that first purchase as much, we do a lot of, I know when you buy your first home, you've done a lot of saving up, and it is an emotional time because you put a lot of time into preparing for that. But don't get too caught up in that. Just make sure you buy something that's obviously going to give you some good growth, because ultimately that second purchase is the one where you can be probably more emotionally connected to the house that you buy.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely a stepping stone. Good advice, Brian. I'm Wilkinson there. So just thanks again for your time today, Sam.
No worries at all.
And thank you all for watching the very first episode. So get in touch with us at any time by posting some comments or any questions you've got, and we'll answer those. If you've got any questions for Sam, I can pass those on, or just leave them in the comments, and we'll make it all happen. But enjoy the rest of your day.
See you guys.